They found her body in the crater, half buried, limbs twisted, still warm. Lieutenant Kira Thorne, age 23, tactical prodigy, dead. Admiral Zell Vor of the Karzul Dominion received the confirmation moments after the detonation. The human girl was neutralized. Their cleanest kill yet. His voice, like polished glass, echoed through the high command chamber, aboard the orbital dreadnought. The resistance dies with her. Begin the sweep. The invasion of Ophiuchi 9 had been progressing slower than projected. Human guerrilla tactics had evolved beyond prediction. Erratic, emotional, infuriatingly effective. Kira Thorne was the worst of them. She had no rank that should have made her important. No bloodline, just results. She took out 5 transport ships and an entire armored division with jury-rigged scrap and stolen drones. Zell Vor knew her face from a threat briefing. Now, it was a cooling corpse. His mandibles clicked in satisfaction. But that satisfaction lasted exactly 57 seconds. Admiral, a sensor technician croaked from the lower platform. There's movement in the crater. Zell Vor turned, posture sharpening. Explain. We confirmed her death. Biosignature terminated. But there's a new signal now, originating from the same spot. The room hushed. The Karzul were not a species prone to superstition. Data was king. But as the technician replayed the footage, even logic lost footing. The tactical camera caught it. Ash swirling, sand lifting. And then her hand, clean, steady, rising from molten rock. No armor, no weapon, just her. The tech's voice was a whisper. Standing up. On the battlefield below, Karzul troops had begun to gather near the crater's edge. One aimed, a pulse rifle. Hesitated, lowered it. The girl was walking, not limping, not staggering, walking with purpose. Her uniform charred to threads, skin radiant, unmarked. Her eyes glowed like matter conversion plasma cores, only less predictable. Gelvor's primary aide stepped forward. It's not her. It's a projection. Some trick. The Admiral watched the girl look up directly at the observation drone. She tilted her head, just slightly. A smirk played across her lips. She knows we're watching, Zell Vor murmured. They dispatched a recon unit, 5 elite shock troopers, trained to neutralize anomalous threats. As they approached, Kira stopped moving. She raised her right hand, fingers loose like she was about to snap. She did. The lead soldier exploded, not from an external blast. From within, armor ruptured, blood atomized, helmet screaming static. The rest fell back. One discharged a plasma burst that bent in midair and struck his own unit. The last turned to run and instantly crumpled, every bone in his body liquefied on impact with nothing visible. Kira resumed walking. From orbit, Admiral Zell Vor opened a private line to Imperial High Command. We have a situation. On Earth, in the command bunker beneath Olympus Mons, General Emmerich Hayes reviewed the same footage. His aide stood silent, a 1,000-yard stare glued to the monitor. She died, the aide finally said. Hayes didn't respond at first. He tapped through encrypted logs, each stamped with red clearance seals. She volunteered, Hayes said eventually. I told them it wouldn't work. Project Lazarus? The aide asked. Hayes didn't look up. It was never supposed to. Activate. Kira was never supposed to get that far. She was the control case, a field test, not a deployment. The Lazarus protocol wasn't a resurrection weapon. It was a trapdoor, a last resort. In theory, it could jumpstart the evolutionary process under extreme neural collapse. The idea was laughable on paper. No one believed it would function, until she died. Back on the surface, Kira stood alone in the impact zone. The wind hissed around her, scattering dust and ash. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes flicked upward, toward the sky, toward the orbiting fleet. A voice, low and distinctly human, murmured in her head. Are you aware yet? She didn't answer aloud. Her thoughts were louder. I see them? All of them. Good. They see you too. From above, the Karzul were beginning to reposition. Stealth drones circled, Scanning. Every spectral reading returned garbled. Her vitals were unreadable, her position unstable. She wasn't teleporting, space around her warped in localized bubbles. Gravity inverted, then reformed. Aboard the dreadnought, science officers offered conflicting theories. Cloaking field, psionic interference, nano-illusion, temporal displacement. None fit. The Admiral finally silenced them. Deploy containment teams. Full kinetic loadout. She dies again. She watched the shuttles descend, 6 of them, fast and heavy. She closed. Her eyes, let them come. When the first landed, they opened with shock grenades and suppressive fire. Kira didn't move. Bullets curved around her. Plasma bolts detonated meters short. A soldier charged, screaming, knife drawn. She stepped forward, no blur, no flourish, and touched his forehead. He vanished, not vaporized, erased. The others broke formation. The humans watching remotely began murmuring. "She's not just back," said Emmerich Hayes. "She's changed." The Lazarus Protocol wasn't about rebirth. It was about unlocking suppressed potential. Dormant strands of proto-consciousness encoded deep in human DNA. Leftover fragments from something ancient. Some said myth. Others, evolution unexpressed. Either way, the project theorized certain death would trigger the release. But Kira had gone further. She was speaking now, softly, in a language that sounded like harmonized gravity waves. The sound alone made Karzul soldiers stagger. She stepped through a wall of flame and emerged before the lead containment unit. They hesitated. Their targeting systems froze. One dropped his weapon involuntarily. "Who are you?" the unit commander demanded. Kira's response was calm. "The future you tried to kill." She raised both hands, fingers splayed. The ground beneath her cracked outward in a perfect circle. Machines froze, visors overloaded. The Karzul began to scream, violent, painful, guttural, like something inside them was being extracted. She walked through the chaos untouched. Above, Admiral Zell Vor locked eyes on the display. "This cannot continue." "We still outnumber them," his aide replied. "No," he said. "We did, a minute ago." The orbital map shifted. Human ships, old, patchwork, barely combat-ready, began appearing across the system. But something had changed. They moved faster, reacted faster, as if they were seeing seconds ahead, predicting outcomes, like they had a new advantage, like they had her. On the planet, Kira stood alone, her voice transmitted across every channel. "You thought killing me would end the war. You never imagined it would start something else." From inside the Karzul dreadnought, low tremors began to build. Console lights flickered, doors opened and shut at random. Artificial gravity pulsed. The science officer stammered. "Admiral, we're under systemic attack." "From where?" Zell Vor barked. "From within, sir." Kira whispered a single word, and a satellite exploded in low orbit. Human forces began converging, their scattered fleets moving like tendrils of one mind. Kira was no longer a soldier. She was a signal, a relay, a conduit, and something was speaking through her. The Admiral stared at the girl now walking across open ground toward a landing shuttle. "No species could evolve that fast," he muttered. He said it again, softer. "Is this doubt?" The final image, recorded from the surface that day, was Kira glancing skyward, a faint grin forming. She mouthed a single word. "Run." She boarded the Karzul shuttle without invitation. The ramp hissed open like a breath held too long, its systems flickering uncertainly as Kira Thorne stepped inside. The soldiers inside didn't raise their weapons. Not out of respect, out of paralysis. Her presence warped something fundamental, like an invisible field pressing down on instinct, dulling aggression. One soldier whispered an old battle hymn, lips trembling. Another dropped to one knee, not in surrender, but in confusion. Their orders had never prepared them for this. Kira didn't speak. She walked to the control panel, laid her palm flat across the console. Lights blinked, sputtered, changed hue. Alien interfaces reconfigured themselves into Earth standard. Navigation cleared. The shuttle took off without a pilot. General Emmerich Hayes watched the data cascade from orbit. Aboard Earth's Black Site Command frigate, Vigilant Ash, silence reigned. He leaned forward, analyzing the waveforms generated by Kira's vitals. They didn't register as human anymore, not precisely. Her physiology was diverging. Adaptive neuroelectric signatures, quantum phase fluctuations in her mitochondrial resonance. Whatever had happened in the crater hadn't just saved her. It had altered the equation of what humanity could become. His aide leaned closer. She's accelerating. Where's she going? To the dreadnought. He didn't flinch. Alone? She's already inside their systems. If she wants to be on board, she will be. The Karzul dreadnought Uljarak was a cathedral of war, kilometers long, shielded in plasma mesh, surrounded by a defense cloud of AI drones and phase interceptors. No vessel had ever breached it without losing half a fleet. Kira's shuttle bypassed them all. No alarm sounded, no weapons fired. The dreadnought opened like it had received a royal code. Admiral Zelvor stood on the bridge, still as glass. His crew formed rigid rows behind him. Data feeds flickered erratically. Gravity fluxes shook the bulkheads. One officer had already collapsed from neural overload. Another was pacing in circles, muttering in ancient dialects. She's violating causality, the comms chief whispered. We're seeing multiple time-stamped versions of her, phasing in and out across decks. Contain it, Zelvor ordered. We can't. She is the breach. The doors opened. Kira stepped onto the command deck, flanked by silence. She didn't blink. Her gaze was calm, steady, but something old shimmered in her posture, something unburdened by human hesitation. You murdered me, she said plainly. Zelvor straightened. You were an enemy combatant. I was bait, she replied. I just didn't know it yet. He took a step forward. What are you now? She tilted her head. You really don't know? He did not, and that terrified him. The Admiral reached for a neural disruptor, but it dissolved in his grip, disassembled molecule by molecule before it could leave its holster. Kira didn't move. She didn't need to. Reality around her obeyed different. Rules now, ones she was still learning, still shaping. I'm not here to destroy you, she said, the Admiral sneered. You've already dismantled a battalion. I'm here to ask a question. Confusion cracked the veneer of control. What? What do you fear more, our vengeance or our curiosity? No one answered. Somewhere deep in the hull, a reactor groaned. Gravity inverted for half a second, slamming 2 crew members against the ceiling, then letting them drop softly, as if regret softened physics itself. I came back not to kill, Kira continued, but to understand why you thought you could. You are a lesser species, Zelvor snapped. Emotionally unstable, technologically erratic. You mistake instinct for innovation. She smiled faintly. And yet here I am, alone, alive, unarmed. And I've reached your throne. Her words cut through the deck like knives through silk. The truth was heavier than any weapon. She had unraveled their logic, their hierarchy, their certainty. That's what scared them. Not her powers, not her resurrection, her unpredictability. Do you know what it means to fight something you can't map? She asked, walking slowly toward the central display. To war against something that rewrites itself between your attempts to define it? She reached the console. The system recognized her touch, not as foreign, not as hostile, as primary. I don't want your surrender, she said. I want your answer. Zelvor clenched his jawline plates. To what? Why are you so afraid of what we might become? No response. I died, she said softly, and came back wrong. You should be studying me. Instead, you ran. Why? Silence reigned. 1,000 sensors pointed at her. 1,000,000 data points collected, filtered, denied. The Dreadnought's AI attempted a deep biometric scan and halted itself. One of the junior officers trembled, then spoke. Because we saw what you were becoming in your final moments. We traced the trajectory of your species. Zelvor turned sharply toward the officer. Silence. She deserves the truth, the officer said, blinking too fast. We projected your evolution. You were never supposed to unlock it this early. But something accelerated you, and we— Say it, Kira said. The officer looked down. We saw a pattern we've only encountered once before. Kira's gaze narrowed. Where? In the Kordathi Abyss. A civilization we couldn't defeat. We bombed their suns into collapse. It didn't stop them. They stopped themselves. Left this plane. Vanished. But before they did, they sent a message. She stepped closer. What did it say? His voice broke. Beware the seed born in chaos. Her breath caught. And you think that's us? We didn't want to find another Kordathi. Not again. You were already unstable, so we tried to end it before it began. Admiral Zelvor remained frozen. Not just in posture, in belief. His reality had narrowed to one truth. They had failed. Naimai, not the end of your empire, Kira said. But I might be the end of your certainty. A tremor shook the deck. Outside, the stars rippled. Not physically, but perceptually. Ships that hadn't been visible before now phased into view. Human vessels. Dozens. Maybe more. But their engines weren't standard. Their movements defied. Inertia. They're sinking with her. Hayes said from orbit, watching through 1,000 data feeds. She's a command node now. One of the alien science officers dropped to all fours, choking on data. She's not alone. There's a network forming. Distributed cognition. Recursive command loops built on emotional bonds. What kind of bonds? Zelvor asked. Human ones, the officer gasped. She's remembering people. And they're responding. Kira was linking with Earth forces, not through command chains, but through connection. Memory, love, rage, laughter, each feeling a tether, each tether a signal. The humans weren't following orders. They were following her, a living signal pulsing, with something new. Zelvor stepped forward. What do you want from us? She looked at him, eyes shimmering with both mercy and warning. Nothing you can give. I only came to see if you could ask the right question. His voice cracked. Which is? She turned away. What comes after fear? The deck lights flickered once, then again. And then the whole dreadnought groaned as systems began rebooting in cascading waves. Not failing. Changing. Kira walked back to the shuttle, untouched. Behind her, no one moved to stop her. She was a storm they couldn't predict, an anomaly they couldn't contain, and yet somehow more human than ever. She stepped aboard. The ramp hissed shut. As she ascended into orbit, the dreadnought sent a single burst transmission to the Carswell High Command. We have witnessed a fracture in causality. The girl is not a weapon, she is a divergence point. Tactical collapse is imminent. Recommend strategic withdrawal from Soldat in Earth's command room. Hayes watched the message decrypt. They're pulling back, his aide whispered. Hayes stared at the screen, jaw tight. No, he said. They're retreating. That's not the same as surrender. The aide swallowed. What now? Hayes looked up, eyes catching the shimmer of Kira's shuttle passing overhead. Now, he said. We start asking who we're becoming. The first thing Colonel Reese saw when the drone's visual feed came back online was the expressionless face of a Zalvar fleet commander flicker with confusion. Not fear, not yet. But something had cracked the surface of their rigid control. Good. Let it break. Status on the re-entry point? Reese barked, voice sharper than the shard of broken helmet still lodged in his ribs. Flux signatures are non-linear. Whatever got her down there. It didn't come back the same way, Ops reported. Or at all. We've got no exit trail. Reese leaned forward, eyes locked on the hollow crater that used to be Alpha Perimeter. It now pulsed faintly with violet light, as if the ground remembered pain. 12 minutes ago, that spot had hosted the public execution of Lieutenant Kira Halden. Now it hummed. Play back the moment. The screen lit with thermal capture. Her body slumped over, limp in the dust. Then, barely perceptible movement. A ripple in the air around her. An impossibly fast spike of internal temperature, followed by sudden cellular stasis. Every nerve in Reese's body tensed. "That's not resurrection," he muttered. "That's an overwrite." The text didn't speak. The room had been whisperless since she rose. No one dared name it. No one wanted to say the thing they feared more than death, that something else had come back in her place. But Reese wasn't convinced. He'd trained her. He knew the scar behind her left shoulder blade, half the size of a cigarette burn, the only wound she never bragged about. He saw it when the recon drones picked her up 15 minutes later, walking through the carnage of a Zalvar forward station like a ghost dressed in human skin. "Why is the fleet retreating?" asked a junior officer, barely old enough to remember Earth before orbital sieges. Reese grinned. "Because they know." "Know what, sir?" "That they've pissed off the wrong species." On the Zalvar command vessel, Admiral Trium exhaled, slow and steady, mandibles twitching with suppressed unease. "Run it again." The room was silent as the holographic display showed the girl walking calmly through an atmosphere saturated with nanite-based neurotoxins. Every biological system should have failed. She didn't flinch. Plasma bolts shattered mid-air a meter from her skin. Her eyes, burning white with shifting fractals, reflected no fear, only momentum. "This violates the paradox lock," hissed his second-in-command. "Nothing comes back after full entropic collapse. This isn't possible." Trium's gaze narrowed. No species evolves that fast. The chamber shifted into analysis mode, walls projecting schematics, timelines, and DNA strand breakdowns. Human physiology had always fascinated the Zalvar. Resilient, irrational, volatile. But now the data was shifting. Kira's molecular pattern was rewriting itself with every pulse. Logic trees failed to model her. Predictive engines returned. "Static. Is this doubt?" someone muttered. Trium didn't answer. He was watching a different feed now, the one where she reached the outer ring of their troop deployment. 17 of their elite charged her with synchronized velocity, their biomechanical blades singing through the air. She didn't draw a weapon. She raised one hand. And they dropped. Neural collapse. No visible force. No warning. "She's using something older than tech," Trium murmured. "Something primal. Do we engage?" "No," Trium said quietly. "We watch." Kira's boots hit the durasteel floor of the Zalvar firebase like a countdown. 1 step. 2. The clatter of fallen weapons echoed behind her. She wasn't running. She didn't need to. "Talk to me," Reese whispered, watching her POV stream. "I know you're in there." No reply. Just visuals. Drones floating around her now. Autonomous. Silent. She didn't dismiss them. Didn't acknowledge them, but they followed her like wolves to an alpha. Ops leaned in. "You think she's compromised?" "She's focused," Reese said. "And if you'd ever seen Kira focused, you'd know that's worse news for them than if she was possessed." A doorway opened in front of her. Automated Zalvar systems. Parting like nervous servants. Inside stood the overmind strategist that ordered her execution. Its voice dripped contempt. "You are an aberration. You should not exist," Kira tilted her head. "Neither should your empire." It didn't hesitate, fired 3 compressed singularity bolts. She caught them. Not metaphorically. Her hand closed around physics and turned it into steam. The EI strategist recoiled. It did not know fear, but it understood protocol. And protocol told it. Retreat. Kira stepped forward, the light in her eyes intensifying, and the walls of the compound began to warp. Metal screamed, folding inward like a dying lung. The strategist vanished in a pulse of phase energy, leaving behind nothing but a scorched sigil. Reese watched it all unfold, breath shallow. She's forcing their hierarchy to observe. She wants them to understand they lost control. "Why not kill them all?" someone asked. "Because that would end the conversation, and she's not done talking." Above the planet, Zalvar fleet formations broke ranks. Not a rout, yet, but they were dispersing, systems blinking red across their shared net. "They're triangulating," Trium said. "Against what?" Trium's voice was low. "Against something that isn't her anymore. She's a vector." The others stared. "She died." What came back isn't just the girl. It's a message from something bigger, and we just told it we could win. On Earth, whispers had already begun. Not in command rooms, not in secure lines, but among the survivors, the kids in crater cities, the old veterans who lit cigarettes in rain and swore they saw angels in their dreams. They said death lost something today. They said Kira Halden walked out of the underworld and didn't look back. And when they asked why, she heard them laughing, someone said. Reese didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just whispered, "We're not done." Across the stars, hidden between gravitational folds, other species were watching. Silent observers who did not intervene. Until now. Until a human girl died, came back, and turned the war into a question. What if humanity had never reached its final form? What if this was just the first draft? The section ends with her walking up the ramp of a grounded Zalvar cruiser, flanked by two of their own, who surrendered without a word. She didn't demand obedience. They gave it. In orbit, Admiral Trium ordered a full tactical retreat. The Empire wasn't losing ground. It was losing belief. Kira stood on the bridge of the Zalvar command cruiser, eyes scanning readouts that pulsed in alien geometries. Symbols once incomprehensible now decoded themselves before her gaze. She hadn't studied their language. She remembered it. That terrified her more than the weapons trained on her from orbit. The two Zalvar standing beside her hadn't moved since they surrendered their weapons. Their hands were still raised, but their postures had shifted, from resistance to reverence. They didn't know what she was. They just knew she wasn't something they could stop. She turned her head slowly, locking eyes with the central command node of the ship. The construct AI flickered, its hard light form glitching between authority and panic. "Directive override initiated," it said, voice distorted. "This vessel is under—" "Not anymore," Kira interrupted. Her voice echoed unnaturally. She hadn't raised it. The air around her carried it, as if the ship itself obeyed her presence. She stepped forward and laid a single finger on the console. All weapon systems powered down simultaneously. Navigation submitted new coordinates she hadn't entered. Deep space, farther than any human vessel had traveled. A place she hadn't seen, but now felt beneath her skin like a suppressed scream. Back on Earth, Colonel Reese watched the satellite feeds as fleet signatures vanished. One by one, the Zalvar command cruisers left orbit, shedding support craft and rerouting jump drives. Not in battle, not in panic, in silence. "They're not running from her," he said aloud, pacing the command deck with military tension, humming beneath his breath. "They're following her." "You think she's controlling them?" Ops asked, voice tight. Reese paused, then shook his head. "No, I think they believe she's leading them somewhere they're supposed to go, and I don't think she's disagreeing." The silence that followed said what no one dared. The Zalvar Empire wasn't collapsing, it was kneeling. On board. The cruiser. Kira moved like a storm trapped in the shape of a soldier. She didn't feel like herself, not entirely. Her memories were intact. Childhood, boot camp, the night she lost her brother in orbit over Europa. But something larger moved inside her now. It didn't speak in words. It bled through her thoughts in images, impulses, gravitational truths. She had died. That much was fact. But in death, something ancient had touched her. It hadn't possessed her. It had remembered her. And in doing so, it left something behind. Legacy. A trigger. Route projection complete, the ship announced. Arrival coordinates selected. Kira blinked. The coordinates weren't random. They formed a spiral, the same pattern carved into the stone beneath the execution platform where she'd fallen. Not Zalvar tech, older, infinitely older. "You think this is over?" she whispered to the bridge. No one responded. They didn't need to. But this was the beginning. We were never the enemy, just the excuse. Below, on Earth, Reese stood before a United Defense Coalition tribunal. The footage played behind him. The resurrection, the walk, the fleet kneeling. Questions fired like bullets. Is she still human? Is she compromised? What protocol do we follow when one of our own becomes a myth? Reese didn't answer them, not because he couldn't, Because he refused to offer comfort when the truth was anything but. She's still one of us, he said finally. But what's inside her isn't, and if it wanted us dead, we'd already be gone. A hush fell over the room. Fear thickened the air, not fear of the enemy, fear of the unknown that wore a familiar face. She's not a threat, Reese added. She's a warning, and maybe a chance. High above, in deep void space, Kira stood before a stasis chamber unearthed from the vault of the Zalvar cruiser. The symbols etched along its edge pulsed when she neared, reacting not to proximity but to recognition. She pressed her hand to the glass, and the lock dissolved into mist. Inside was not a body, but a map. Holographic threads wove themselves into constellations she'd never seen, pointing to systems unlisted in any database. Dead systems? Burned ones, no survivors, no broadcasts, no warnings. She saw flashes, glimpses of war not yet fought, silhouettes of creatures too massive for planets with minds that unraveled language. Her breath caught. They weren't coming. They had already been here once, and something had forced them back. The thought struck her with the weight of memory that didn't belong to her. She clutched the edge of the panel, knuckles white. It wasn't her war, not originally, but it was now, because whatever legacy had brought her back didn't choose her randomly. It chose Earth, chose humanity, chose the species that had always evolved best when backed into a corner. "We are not done," she whispered to the stars. Back on the Zalvar homeworld, the High Synod gathered in secret for the first time in centuries. Protocols failed to classify the situation. The language of conquest had no room for worship. Yet the visual logs could not be denied. The humans had produced something not born of science or rebellion, but of myth, and the myth had teeth. One elder finally spoke. "Have we made a god?" "No," said another. "We've reminded the old ones where to look." The chamber darkened, as all systems redirected power to external scan beacons. The sky above their citadel shimmered faintly, not with ships, with pressure. Something vast was turning its attention toward them, distant, yet inevitable. Back on the command cruiser, Kira sat alone in the dark, the stars stretching endlessly beyond the reinforced glass. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Time moved differently now. Her pulse synchronized with gravitational anomalies. Her thoughts orbited a single point of truth. She wasn't finished. Behind her, a soft chime rang. The two Zalvar entered, hesitant. "Permission to speak?" one asked. She nodded. "Why, you." Kira looked up. Her voice was soft. "Because I was the one they tried to break in public. They thought humiliation would stop a species that built its civilization by surviving extinction events. They didn't understand. Pain doesn't silence us, it sharpens us." The alien's gaze shifted. "And the others? What happens to the ones who resist?" Kira stood. "They'll wish they hadn't waited until resistance was their only option." The room fell into silence again. Outside, the stars blinked slower, time folding inward. Coordinates locked. Her next destination wasn't a planet. It was a tomb, a forgotten signal. A beginning buried in someone else's end. Reese stood at the edge of Earth's upper atmosphere, watching the void with silent reverence. They hadn't heard from her since the fleet vanished. Not directly, but data spikes echoed in sensor logs, fractals, that matched her new biosignature. She was moving between systems faster than anything they could track. She wasn't hiding. She was mapping the future by digging up the past. He exhaled and turned to his adjutant. "She's rewriting the rules. The adjutant looked uneasy. "And if we don't like the rules she writes?" Reese stared at the stars. "Then we better pray she still thinks like a human." In the dark between galaxies, Kira approached the tomb. Not of a person, of a memory. The door opened before her. Inside was silence, the kind that waits and watches. She stepped through, without hesitation. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was preparation, because death had learned her name and decided it wasn't finished with her yet.